Welcome to this audio session recording taken at the Agroforestry Show, which was organised in September 2023 as a partnership between the Woodland Trust and the Soil Association. For more session recordings, go to agroforestryshow.com or explore and subscribe to the Agroforestry Show YouTube channel. Enjoy!
Thank you for coming this morning. It's such a glorious day for us, and we can hide from the sun for a little bit in here. So welcome to Cows and Trees, which I love the name of that. So a panel discussion for the Devon Silvopasture network. So my name is Simeon Day from the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, Southwest, and I'm supporting 6 farmers who've planted trees within pasture used by livestock on their farms in Devon as a research field lab to learn more about the benefits of combining trees and cows, although other livestock are available. In fact, on some of the farms, there will be sheep involved. So the project is farmer-led, but has a number of partners and funders. Innovative farmers, they're ensuring that all the data and information that we can collect is going to be shared with other farmers. Rockhampton Research, whose Northwick Research Farm has actually planted some of the designs, or all of the designs. The Soil Association are helping fund the project. The Organic Research Centre are also carrying out some of the research. The Woodland Trust developed the planting designs and provided the trees. And Frank Southwest, we also worked on the designs and are supporting the farmers in the network. We'd just like to show you a short video introducing you to the farmers.
I believe it's important to put silvopasture into commercial farms because I think that it's a commercial opportunity.
I'm looking at it from cow welfare. It's shown that cows are much more relaxed underneath tree cover. They get the benefits of the shade in the summer and the shelter in the winter, and browsing on different shrubs and varying their diet.
We were interested in joining the silvopasture trial mainly to build biodiversity on the farm, to create a different landscape that isn't already on the farm. This is my favourite hawthorn tree.
I really want to farm in a way that's beneficial for the environment, beneficial for the climate. So I was looking around to see how I could incorporate trees into my farming.
We definitely wanted to have all 3 of the designs, so the wood pasture, the shelter belt and the regular spaced rows and a control field, to make sure that any changes that are coming about due to the design of the trees being planted within the fields is something that we could measure.
The trees symbolise something for me that it's something really important in the future, and it might be us who will reap the rewards in 10 or 15 years time, or it might be the next tenant or share farmer or custodian of this land.
I was interested in silvopasture because I wanted a low cost, high production system. I couldn't really carry on with the intensive system we had, high cake bills, high fertiliser bills, and it just wasn't viable anymore. We decided that we'd go the opposite way, become very extensive, try and keep our cash flow low, and we thought an agroforestry silvopasture system was a perfect place to start, really. I couldn't emphasise enough how important we think trees are going forwards.
So more detailed videos of each of the farmers are actually available on the Innovative Farmers website, so you can really kind of get to know them and see their farms. So as you can see, the farms are spread across the central belt of Devon, just north of Dartmoor. They have a range of soils, a range of rainfall amounts, and are a mixture of dairy, beef, sheep, and arable. And the project was set up to address the lack of science and information which is really available on the impact of silvopasture in the UK, and to research key areas of change, such as animal health and welfare, soil carbon, and biodiversity. Proving that silvopasture will benefit the whole farm system and ultimately provide a return on the investment will help justify the commitment to incorporating trees into the livestock farming. So 3 designs are being tested. Firstly, cluster planting. So this is to mimic the balance between of open pasture and clusters of trees and shrubs as a wood pasture. Each one has been planted with a central core of trees surrounded by shrubs, such as hazel, holly, spindle, hawthorn and such. Secondly, regularly spaced rows systems, rows of trees planted which are alternating with the shrubs in between. And one of the key elements here is on the actual standard trees is a mantle of hawthorn which have been planted around the outside, which will then grow to protect the tree when grazing is allowed back into the field. And then finally, shelter belts, some of which are large enough to actually act as living barns. They've been located so they block the prevailing westerly winds and have a central core of major trees such as oaks, and then rows of minor trees, minor broadleaves such as like common alder and downy birch, and on the outside then clusters of like willow and hazel and such, and then finally that mantle of hawthorn around each standard tree. So over the next 12 years, a number of research activities will take place, which we'll talk about in more detail in a moment, but essentially they're covering surveys of vegetation, soil organic carbon, and the insect communities, and then how these trees are going to affect those metrics as they grow. Soil composition and productivity changes at different rates of canopy development. Biodiversity research, including bats, birds, and dung beetles. Monitoring tree establishment rates and the practicalities of actually looking after the trees, considering all the variety of factors which can influence this, such as climate, competition, and stock accidentally breaking in and eating them all. And that has happened. Why and how trees are damaged by livestock, and also how long do different tree species actually need before they are browsable without inflicting damage on that tree. And also finally, Lindsay Wistance from the Organic Research Centre is leading on the animal behaviour and health aspect of the research, particularly on the effects of shade and shelter on animal performance and disease incidents. So hopefully this has given you a flavour of the project, but the best way to learn, I think, is to hear from the people involved and their experiences. So I'd like to introduce our panel of speakers today, our farmers. So we've got Henry Andrews, Rob Dunn, and Andy Gray. So we've got a couple of aspects we want to talk about for you, first of all, but then we'll open to questions from the audience, if that's okay. Hi, guys. So, first of all, I think probably a good way of introducing everybody, if you can say who you are and tell us about your farm and why you got involved in the field lab.
Hi, I'm Andy. So we farm on the light loamy red soils in mid-Devon, and only a smallish farm, but we're connected to a butchery which supplies hotels and restaurants, so we're very connected to our market, and therefore some of the basis of the interest in silvopasture is actually the story we can tell and delivery on that. And I would say the best way to learn actually is to do it. The second best way is to listen. So, I would exhort people, if you're interested, to just put in a small bit, because actually seeing it happening is the best way to learn anything. Anyway, over to Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Dunn. I work for Rothamsted Research. There's two areas of Rothamsted. There's one in Hertfordshire, which is mainly arable research, but the place that I work at is North Wick in Devon, which is mainly pastoral. So we have a history of having agroforestry research on our site from the 1980s. So we were very keen to get involved in a new bit of research, which is why we wanted to do it. And we do lots of research which looks at the environmental impacts of agriculture on greenhouse gas emissions, on water quality, as well as the productivity of the farm itself. So this suits very nicely the kind of work that we do.
Hi, I'm Henry. I farm in Devon on very heavy clays, so very short grazing periods, long housing periods, boggy, slight nightmare to farm. So I thought, try and put trees in, see if something happens, see if it gets a bit easier. I started farming in my own right about 10 years ago. Before now, I was working for my father. We had slight disagreements, parted ways, and I swiftly learned that farming by yourself is a lot harder. especially bills. So I thought it is much easier when it's someone else's bank account. But so I thought I like to have a low cost, very extensive system. Try and keep the cows out much longer, and have a much more productive farm because the trees helps with the welfare, helps with the soil. And it's just I thought it'd be a good all round thing to start really.
Fantastic, thank you. It's really interesting. I think it's how you've got polar opposites of soils. Basically, we're actually looking at and seeing the benefits of those and how that's going to change. So talking of the research, so Andy, so you're leading on some of the aspects of the biodiversity research. Can you tell us what's being studied and how?
Okay, so we, Mel, who's in the audience here, bludgeoned me into applying for a UKRI grant to do some biodiversity research, and so which I did, and then we had to come up with what we were actually going to research, which was quite a lot more difficult. We settled on having speed dated lots of scientists on Zoom. Dung beetles, because one, they're indicative of good ecology, and two, they're particularly interesting to our set of farmers anyway. And then we had a bit of money left over, so we thought we'd look at acoustics. And the main premise behind the research project is the fact there's not enough ecologists out there to scale out regen farming and actually measure the benefits. So we were looking at, very trendy nowadays, I know, AI and different ways of using that. So we designed, well, I then met a German in a chat room, which always sounds a bit dodgy, who knows his way around AI cameras for insects, and I borrowed his ideas with a lot of help from Max, and for £130 I bought a camera which is capable, when told, using a bit of Python script on a Raspberry Pi, which we stuffed in a box, but it recognises something as an insect. And then it takes its photograph, and then it assigns the insect a number or name, which allows you to track it. And then it continues taking its photograph, and then it can do it with unlimited numbers of extra insects, whilst cropping them all into little insect-sized boxes, which it then puts into data, which you can then upload in the future, and tell the AI pipeline that this is a whatever it is, using Kelly Jarrett from Rothamsted, who's helping me and partnering me with this, and then we can teach the AI what the various insects are, and hopefully build that machine learning experience. So lots of other people are taking photographs of insects from all sorts of angles, stuck on a pin from the Natural History Museum, but this has the capacity to take multiple photographs, which you can assign names to, and then teach the AI. That sort of thing. So it's clever stuff, really, and actually, affordable technology. Building the trap, but each trap costs about, I don't know, £300, I suppose. It takes quite a lot of time to get the hang of it. But once you've got the hang of it, and this is just iteration one. As time goes on, these we'll be able to make it more user-friendly and that sort of thing. And then with the bat research, I'm partnering with the BTO, Stuart Newson, who's a lead on, lead in this country when it comes to acoustics and bat recognition. That's quite well developed. You can actually, they've already built a pipeline on the BTO website, which you can feed your bat data into, and it'll tell you with different degrees, percentage of certainty as to what species you've identified. So that's quite well down the line, and what Stuart and I are doing with that is actually building the protocols to make it farmer friendly. So again, you haven't got to be held to ransom by an expensive bat ecologist. You can actually potentially in the future rent a mini bat for a week, do your own bat surveys, and whether or not it's at this stage it's will be recognised by people buying BNG credits or anything like that as being independent enough. Who knows? But it's a first step on that journey. But really, what we're doing there is developing the protocols to let farmers do that. Why is that in silvopasture? Well, I mean, we've hung research on giving us the ability to baseline our own farms at the same time, because if we're doing a 12-year research project, it seems potty not to capture as much baseline data before we start. So it's a sort of stalking horse to gain these opportunities for most of us to sort of work out what bats we've got now and see what the increase will be in the future. Hope that's okay.
That's brilliant, thank you. But the insects that you're actually taking photos of, so it's dung beetles is primarily that you're looking at, is that correct? But you've also capturing flies as well.
Predominantly flies, to be honest. We seem to get a lot more flies and a lot less dung beetles. One of the problems is, one of the things is, in temperate climates, we're not that sure as to what time of day the dung beetles are that active. It doesn't seem to be. We haven't, having done a literature review, we haven't found that much detail on what time of day they come in. So at the moment, and they need to land on a white background, basically, otherwise. So, and I'm not quite sure whether the dung beetles are flying over the white background and head diving into the cowpat or what they're up to. But we're not getting very many dung beetles, but we're getting a hell of a lot of flies, which of course is also of interest because lots of them are flies we don't particularly want. So monitoring, so it's all good. Sometimes when you're doing research, it's quite good to pivot into something else if your first strand isn't working. So that's the joy of being a farmer. You haven't got to be quite so good as the Rothamsted guys who have to stick to their original line.
That's great, and I think what's interesting is that fly aspect where there's some thoughts that agroforestry or silvopasture can actually increase the incidence of blowflies and headflies and such, and so this is going to be interesting research to really kind of, again, proving that point is why it's justifiable to do what we want to do with planting trees in pasture. And also, just a little side, so I believe you're actually a finalist in the BBC Food and Farming Awards this year for this work. Is that true?
It is. Well, and lots of other things, and lots of other research lines that Rothamsted are doing on our ground, and so on and so on. But yeah, there's probably only 4 people entered. Who knows?
You've got to be in it to win it. And also, I think your farm's going to be featured on Radio 4, is it? In October, I think. It's going to, so you can listen.
Sunday morning, sometime in early October. So,
yeah, so hopefully keep an ear out for that. Excellent. And Rob, so what monitoring work is Rothamsted Research carrying out?
So before the project started, we asked the farmers what were they most interested in. And the things that they came out with were soil carbon, biodiversity, and like animal welfare. And Rothamsted has a long history of soil science research, so that's when we got involved in the project. So we've taken soil samples from all of the farms from before the trees were planted, so we have a real baseline set of data. Those soil samples, and there were thousands of them, have taken a long time to process, but they've been processed now, so we have that data. We now have funding secured to do another round, which obviously the soil carbon isn't going to be a very fast reactor from planting the trees, so we're probably going to do it in about 4 or 5 years' time. And we'll start seeing some of the differences. So we know that in the future that we're going to have to do repeated measures of soil carbon to actually see the change in the soil from the planting of the trees. So it's something that Rothamsted is like long-term committed to now, hopefully.
And also, we're actually mapping the location of every single 9,500 trees which have been planted, so they can actually make that association comparison between the soil carbon and an actual species of tree as well, to see if that has an extra layer of effect. And so there's been a bat monitoring equipment being moving around. So have you enjoyed using that, Henry?
I'm afraid I haven't used it.
Oh. Okay. So, but from all of this research that's happening, what's the kind of most interesting result that you're looking forward to?
From my point of view, I think biodiversity in my farm comes second. It's the farm has to. I've got 4 young children. The farm's got to survive. It's got to keep us fed. So I want to make the farm as high production as possible, but also be sensitive to biodiversity, to carbon. So my main interest is research into cattle welfare, into their weight gains, how grazing between and on trees can help them. So we've noticed, so in the last 2 years we haven't used antibiotics once. We've found that sort of grazing the willows and things has helped the lameness, things like that. So I'm a bit selfish, but I'm purely profit driven, and it also helps that biodiversity and the environment ties in a bit nicely as well.
Okay, so you say you're purely profit-driven, but I remember you saying that you've actually got a seat in each of your fields, so that at the end of the day, you can sit there and watch your cows.
Well, it came from a bit of a dark place. So about 4 years ago, we had a big old TB outbreak. We farmed 120 acres. We had 60 suckler cows and their followers, so very high numbers on the farm. We're finishing the bulls off at 12 months old, high cake bills. With the heifers we're finishing at 16 months. Also, EUs, the bulls come back for 400 kilos dead weight. And then we got hit by TB. In 9 months, we went down from 60 cows down to 37. Half of on one day up, we had 10 shots. They were 8 months in calf. So it was a big turning point. I couldn't really carry on, and I got sort of thoroughly depressed, really. And that same day, the 10 were shot, was my second son's due date. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was sort of mooching around, and then we had the really nice old coppice which the cows graze. And I just went there to contemplate things. And I just realised how happy they were. And so they normally if you enter a field, they sort of perk their ears up and things. They're on alert. They didn't mind me. They're browsing the trees and things. And so that was a turning point, really. I thought that they're happy, and then I thought, well, actually, perhaps I should take more time and just watch the cows, watch the calves, or watch the cattle, and see what they're doing, see what areas of the farm they like, what parts they're avoiding. So I now make a point. I tried it once a week, but school holidays been a nightmare. So of just sitting in the field, just taking notes, even for 5 minutes, and just watch nature and watch your farm. And it's I think we all, in such a fast-paced life, we're sort of, especially this summer, we've been sort of chasing weather windows but sometimes you just got to sit back and take stock.
That's great, thank you. And so from your video there, it seems that it's actually becoming easier to manage your cows as well?
Yeah, so I've done I don't know what to call these designs. I call it I call this a avenue alley design. So we've split a 15-acre field up with 9 strips of trees, and it ties in really well with a block grazing system. So each side of the trees is electric fence. I just put a bungee cord across. Really easy to move them. We've had the same 20 cows and their followers in there all summer. Haven't moved them from a different field. This is a continuous rotation going up and down the avenues. Once they finish the last avenue, they come back to the start. So it just makes life so much easier. And I think that's also, I think sometimes we try and make life hard for ourselves as farmers, and just try. And I think try and be a bit savvy, and a bit lazy, and you can spend more time with your lovely disruptive children.
So trees make happy cows and happy farmers.
Yeah, and very happy wives as well.
Most importantly. So Andy, have you observed any benefits at this early stage already? I mean, they're talking 3 years. 2-3 years the trees have been in. Have you noticed any benefits?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm thoroughly enjoying the whole experience. I have actually. Put cattle in on a sort of very, very extensive system in the winter, partly to wake up my seed bank, and that was just a decision just to see what the balance between damage and benefit was, and so in 4 acres I think they knocked over 10 trees which were all flexible enough to put them back up again. So in the wintertime when there's no foliage, I'm already stocking it. My approach to, I think the biggest cost of silvopasture systems is the opportunity cost of not putting livestock on your land, or not taking an income from something which Lloyd's Bank is my landlord, so I have to keep paying them lots, and so I do need to generate something. I'm coming out of a pretty tough arable system which gives me the opportunity to do stewardship. So between my avenue planting, I've got AB8, I think it is, pollen mixes, which pay 680, I think, at the moment per hectare. So effectively, I've defrayed that lost income by being a bit smart with the stewardship payments. I know you can't do that with grassland systems, but I'm fortunate to be to have all my land as registered as arable, so there's a benefit there. I think one of the, from a point of view of early gains knowledge-wise, is the mantle of free hawthorns around our trees. We're 2.5 years in. Those hawthorns we planted 9 inches high. They're now in the main 5 feet high, and they are already providing protection. So a system which I thought would take 12 years before we could put livestock in there, by using that sort of living hedge or living tree guard of thorns, I reckon we'll be summer stocking in 5 years. So I think that from a point of view of early knowledge gain, I think those hawthorns are a very, very interesting part of it. I debate in my head as to whether or not I should actually cut them off and coppice them now to get greater thickening. But at the same time, I think maybe the cattle will just take the tops out of them, and that'll take the apical dominance away, and they'll thicken anyway. But let's say, but yeah, that's a good one. And I will say, with Henry's point that it does actually. I think living on a landscape full of trees is a delightful thing, and you don't get taxed for living in a nice place when compared to, say, we farmers hate paying tax, but that's a pleasure you can have from the experience of doing it. And actually, there's a certain amount of endorphin rush when people just go, "Oh, you're pretty damn good. You've got, if you show a Guardian journalist a line of trees with wild flowers planted between them, they just think you could do dreadful things after that, and you'll still get away with it."
So the Food and Farming Awards is in the bag. So, okay, that's all lovely and positive. Let's talk about the downsides now. So, has there been any downsides from this that you haven't been inspecting, or you've had to kind of experience? That's all three of you. Yeah, Rob.
I think the downsides that we found is that there was a surprising number of broken stakes in the first winter. Lots and lots of them went out. So even though we'd spent a long time preparing the ground and putting the trees in, it took a lot of revisiting to then restake things. So we should have invested a little bit more money in better quality stakes. So that was one lesson that we learned.
And that's interesting. That's something that all the farmers have experienced in that. And because there's a particular, was it Storm Eunice? Oh, I can't remember what the name was now. There's so many of them. But yeah, it basically flattened a lot of the trees.
Yeah. And I think the second thing that we've learned is that our hawthorn trees are nowhere near as good as Andy's. Because we have lots of wild red deer which browse everything. So the trees that we planted are in 2 different types of guards, one which are 1.8 metres tall, they're fine, but the ones that are in the smaller spiral guards are basically just getting nailed. Anything that pops out the top of them just gets browsed off. So our shrubs are a lot smaller than Andy's. So control your red deer.
Andy, have you...
I've got a 30-06, so the deer don't get that far down the line. It's and actually most of my staff carry a gun as well. So, I mean, the other thing, I think this Roundup, I think, has been a major part of the success of my trees. Is they've grown very fast because I've mullered the grass competition, and I've done 2 years of that. I think. And that's what everybody advised me. I reckon that 3 years probably would be more sensible, looking at my context. And yeah, if you're not going to put on, if you're not going to control the weeds with chemical, then you need to control them with something. The grass and trees just have been trying to kill each other for tens of thousands of years, and they need to. But you need to get those trees away and down. Because it's a scientific trial, we've put in 2 metre tree guards. I don't need 2 metre tree guards, so they've been a disadvantage to me. But I have to align with all the others. A 2 metre tree guard, if you haven't got big deer, is just a big sail for the wind to catch, and also it's not allowing as much photosynthetic area, so it'll be slowing you down. So. But beyond that, actually, I've just loved every minute of it. To be honest, I just think it will be a more profitable system. I think it'll be we can have our cake and eat it. We can produce nature, we can capture carbon, and we can produce more meat. My ambition is to turn trees into meat, and I'm absolutely sure it'll work. But I'm trying not to prejudge the science.
Henry.
I've always been told I'm an honest person, maybe too honest. The first Yeah, I can quite safely say I was contemplating chopping all the trees off most weekends after there'd be a gale, snapping the stakes, and you'd be out there rebanging the stakes. But I think part of it was the fact that we were on a tight budget, so we bought these fairly knotty stakes, which seem to snap if you just looked at it. So, I can say that I think invest in staking. It saves you so much back-breaking labour and disappointment. But first year's done, second and third year, and it's so nice when you're driving along the field, seeing see the trees popping out. We got two different designs. We got the shelter belts and the alleys. The shelter belts we decided to plant on the Red Deer M5, so they've had quite a bit of competition. But the alleys which you fenced each side with electric fencing, the deer haven't touched, and that's been so much easier. And also the alleys are so much easier to maintain because you can just go up an alley once a week, restake a few, and then but shelter belts is just I find a lot of back-breaking faff, and I still do not like shelter belts at the moment. But I'm sure in 10 years' time I will.
Yeah, you'll love them. And that's something that we've got to really seen is that whole tree establishment aspect, and just quite how much work it actually takes to bring these baby trees into kind of an establishment situation where they can then properly start looking after themselves. We've had some quite interesting environmental factors which have been influenced, such as the multiple storms, and then the long drought last year, and then an early drought this year as well, and then it just rained for 2 months until today. But yeah, so it's been really interesting to see how that's all played out, and that's a good part of what we're going to be studying is that whole establishment process, and to see what those different factors are that you need to consider when actually planting the trees. Well, great. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff that we wanted to talk about. So I'm looking at the time. We've got about 20 minutes, I think. So we're happy to take questions from the audience. So, thank you. We've got a roving mic coming round. Thank you.
Hi. I'm just wondering, are you looking at all, is anyone doing research into growing the trees actually from seed? So, like, putting loads of seeds in a hole with a guard around it or something?
Not in this research. The trees were provided by the Woodland Trust and were supplied through their Trees for Your Farm kind of scheme. But I know there is another talk going on today, this week, a couple of days, I'm not sure when, and they are going to be talking about it's a tree nursery one, and I know Charlie is going to be speaking about that, so that could be well one to go and have a look at.
Okay, and can I just quickly say, do they browse the trees in winter then? They don't, because there's no leaves, so you can have the cows there?
Correct, that's in my case. I mean, I have got hollies and I should have Scots pines, but they all died. So yeah, in the winter they don't tend to. And we are getting near hedges terrific numbers of volunteer ash and things like that, and sycamores coming up as well. So we are, who's going to turn them down? They're there. You might select them as opposed to what you had there before.
There has been a reasonable amount of beating up as well that has taken place, both from trees that have been supplied again by the Woodland Trust, or, as you say, from seedlings being found on some of the farms. They've just decided to pull them out, and rather than get rid of them, put them into the shelter belt. So there has been this kind of continuous kind of replanting. Another question? Oh, sorry.
Forgive me if you've covered this and I missed it, but in terms of tree planting, then obviously you need a very short sward, right? And then do you ever do the rep lines or partial scarification in order to get the trees in, and then mulch mats and voles, those kind of issues? Like you talked about letting them establish by making the sacrifice of 3 years of Roundup perhaps versus the grass in order for the long-term benefit. How do you get them in there successfully? It's interesting. There's been a variety of different ways of the planting process that has taken place, and then the post-planting on the sward management. And so it's going to be interesting to see that some of those results will be coming out to see the success. Because, Andy,
So I had a dead sward, obviously, and I used a satellite navigated tractor with three subsoiler legs on the back to create lines on the landscape, which gave me exact 14-metre rows. And also I had 60 volunteers to plant my trees. I didn't plant any myself. So my soil's a very light, sandy loam. So completely the opposite of Henry's. So Henry and I are coming at it from complete opposite directions soil-wise. But I had the great advantage when it came to regen farming of completely destroying my soils to the point where it was so extraordinarily obvious that something had to change. So I had a head start on everybody else by being worse earlier. So no, it isn't. We're not inverting. It's literally just a slot, and it enabled us to plant 8,500 trees in 2 weeks, and I think that very, very fast planting technique works. Also, it picks up the. I was planting across spring lines, so it was picking up the water as it moved down through the soils and directed them to the trees as well. It was just, I found it a very successful thing. I don't know, Rob, do you want to add what you did?
I was about to say, Rob, if you could talk about your experience, but what's interesting, one of the key things as well is that time lag between the trees turning up from the nursery in a bag and maybe going into the barn, and how long it is between their arrival and then you're actually putting them in the ground, and also how long it actually takes you to do that planting work as well.
Yeah, so we're on heavy clay, the same as Henry. I think Rothamsted is obviously very different to a farm in that we've got lots of employees, and it was not a problem to get people to come out and plant trees. It was very easy. You just asked them, and you got lots of volunteers. I think some of the other farms have also had volunteers for planting trees on their farm. So, no, my history as a scientist at Rothamsted, I've set up lots of plot trials. So I'm sort of used to marking out plots and knowing where to plant the trees. So we did ours manually, not with satellites. But no, we just basically skyfied the ground with our spade, like scurfed it, and then put a V slot in, and then planted the bare root trees in, banged in the stake, and put over the tree guard. So we planted 2,500 on our farm, and we did it in just under 3 weeks. But we had a break in the third week when we were waiting for some extra tree guards to arrive. So it probably would have taken us 2 weeks. And Roundup? So we followed the first summer with a Roundup sprayed around each of the trees, but only in that first year. Yeah. And so no, I mean, the fields that we've got our trees planted in are quite remote from trackways. So actually getting mulch in would have been a hell of a job. 2,500 wheelbarrow loads, basically. So yeah, we've pulled grass out of tubes and away from the trees a few times, but yeah, we've just left them to their own devices, which is probably why ours aren't growing as well as Andy's, as well as the red deer.
Well, it's interesting though because Carolyn, who's on here, she's planted hers and always meant to get round to doing Roundup, but actually never did, and they've all actually established really well. So again, it's this thing, this just trying it out basically. Henry, what about you? How do you plant?
I always seem to have an unfortunate timing, and we sort of time the trees turning up with my wife going to labour. So, and then unfortunately we're sort of in hospital for quite a long time. So, yeah, so it's a bit stressful. But that was with the old spade. Similar story to Carolyn. My life is full of mildew, and not often have done it. So some trees we did a mulch, some trees we did Roundup, and some trees left to their own devices. On the alleys, we've fenced half a metre away from the trees with electric fencing, and the bottom strand is knee height. So actually, we find the cows, calves, whatever, do help quite a lot with the grass suppression. So
that's great. That's the thing that I've seen before is the electric fence being high enough so the cows can actually get their heads underneath and just kind of manage that grass, not right in between the trees, but certainly on that edge. Sorry, you had a question here, please.
What tree species did you go for, and how will you manage the trees long term? Are you going to just let them grow? Will you coppice them or pollard them, that kind of thing?
Rob.
Test of memory now. Peduncular oak, Scots pine, aspen, field maple, downy birch, alder are the trees, and then in the shrub.
And elm. So
Wych elm is in the shrub. Holly, elder, willow,
spindle,
and another one, hazel. And then in one of the designs we planted hawthorn and blackthorn mixture. That's in the wood pasture design. And then the other two designs just had hawthorn, no blackthorn. And in terms of future management, we know that it's not a woodland that we're creating. This is silvopasture. It's meant to be grazing land. And the only sort of stipulation that we had for the design of the planting, other than rows or circles or a shelter belt, was that when we were planting the oaks, we should plant two together so that we know if one of them is doing better than the other. When we thin, we can take out the poorer one, and then we'll end up with with smaller numbers than we've got at the moment. At the moment, we've got 200 trees per hectare, irrespective of what the design is. But we know that's going to diminish over time, so yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting as well to see. Obviously, we've got 7 sites we can work on, and the whole kind of productivity of the sward, how that's kind of it compares with the canopy development as well. And so we've actually got opportunities to maybe do some thinning on some, leaving others, and so on, just to see how it all works.
We've also planted chestnuts and walnuts. The Woodland Trust paid for the trees, and they prefer us to plant indigenous. It's interesting that chestnuts and walnuts with 2 hot years have grown an awful lot faster, having a slightly more Mediterranean bent. The benefits of those for my system, because everything is context-driven, every aspect of the way we farm is so much driven by your previous culture, history, market opportunity, and everything else like that. So I've got a meat business, so I have access to chefs, so the walnuts potentially in the future I can graft on hybrid varieties and produce walnut oils. And with the chestnuts, you could either pick them up or we could use them for pata negra type hams. Again, using hybrid varieties, preferably choosing early, middle, and late varieties to extend the season when they'll be dropping them. Then when it comes to the oaks, this is further down the line, but we can just take advice. The Forestry Commission, they've got good ideas from the point of view. Belgians can produce veneer quality oak in open spaces through intelligent pruning and that sort of thing. So it's so much down to, have you got the time? Have you got the market? The fascinating thing with all of this is we're being exhorted as landowners and farmers to plant trees, yet we haven't really worked out the market for these extra trees, particularly when it comes to small scale and local, because you go to a forestry company and tell them that they're going to send you a £300,000 harvesting machine for 5 acres, they're going to laugh at you. And so we have to work out, whether or not chestnut fence posts and things like that. So, we're planting these things for hundreds of years. It's there's this sort of balance between getting on and doing it and planning what the hell you think you want in 50 years' time and 100 years' time. And the danger is that you just sit there like a rabbit in headlights. So, do something. And I tend to take the view from the point of view of the varieties. It's a bit like planting a cover crop. Is you bang in hundreds of things. Some things are successful, some things aren't, and you can actually thin. Everything we've done, we will thin in the future. So in the future, we've kicked the decision down the road a bit, because you have that opportunity to select out for things you think will be valuable, and some things it's useful to have early doors to almost act as a nursery and a filler and an alternative grazing, thing for your livestock to protect, to give the other stuff a rest. There's so many different ways of looking at it. It's fun. It's complicated, but it's fun.
I think it's really important as well to have that the idea that you need to have the right system for your kind of agricultural practice, but also the right species as well. So that if you're going to be selecting something which is a very heavy maintenance burden, and you don't have that time because you're Henry and you've got lots of kids, take all your time. But then you are going to have a workforce on site to help you kind of collect some of the fruit and the nuts. So I see a question up there.
Hello, we focused very much on the tree so far. I'm a bit more interested in the cow. So I'd like some comments really on how you're measuring the differences in production and health, and what initial effects you found.
I mean, essentially, we're at a very early stage in this field lab. The trees have been in 1-2 years, and so at this stage, we're not actually allowing the grazing, the cows, to go into those systems. Some have been kind of going in yours, but essentially, when they're able to go into the living barns and stuff, that's when we'll really be looking. So it's going to be, Lindsay's work is going to come online in the next couple of years to really know what those benefits are. But
how are you going to look at that?
Shall I go on that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing you can tell, one of the metrics I always, slightly odd way to put it, with how happy cattle are is their sort of move away distance. So if you walk up to a mob of cattle in a field, in a bare field, and they're all standing up, how close do you get before they start getting edgy and move away? And then compare it to them in a silvo system or wood or something like that. And I mean, Lindsay's previous experience is that you can get a hell of a lot closer before the cattle edge away because they're just more relaxed. So there's that sort of thing. I mean, we can just do FCRs on them to an extent, or growth rates on them, and that sort of thing in the future. I know it's complicated, but there will be ways of doing it.
Does that mean you're keeping animals away from the trees as well to give a comparison?
I expect we will have to have paired trials on aspects of this, but I mean, it's probably 8 years, 10 years before we have to actually do it. And Lindsay's, I don't know if you want to know Lindsay, but she's pretty damned awesome when it comes to this stuff. And we're also looking at the effects of head flies and face flies, which, again, we haven't worked out the exact protocols to do it, but we're looking at the downsides as well as the upsides. The likelihood that we're getting more ticks on the landscape anyway, and whether or not having a three-dimensional grazing regime will add more ticks to livestock's lives and things like that. So, and ways of mitigating that if that exists. So, there are downsides to this system when it comes to insects potentially, but I also suspect there'll be ways of mitigating those downsides.
I mean, I'm doing silvopasture outside the scheme as well. So, I've got existing ancient sort of coppice woodland which we've been grazing for the last sort of 8 years, and since I've become a bit more clued up on it, we've sort of done our own sort of on-farm experiments, not by scientists, but by abattoir reports and ante-mortems. Things like worm egg counts. We found that that the mobs grazing in the coppices have a lot less worm counts in their stool. So we've sampled stock grazing open field, open pasture, and woodland. So the tannin-rich trees has really helped the worm burden. So we don't worm the cattle going into the trees. We haven't done that for the last sort of 3 years, and we've hardly found any burdens whatsoever. Again, I say our antibiotic usage has gone down massively with the cattle allowed to browse the old coppice. And there's so many tree species in there which have so many sort of health benefits. We weigh our cattle. We try to is once a month, especially the growers. And our daily live weight gains haven't dropped off since we stopped feeding brought-in concentrates and blends. So tree leaves also have very high protein content. You have some mulberries and things like that. They're very similar to red clover protein content. So as I say, it's my on-farm data. Is not we have some scientists who I think want to make things very exact, but from my experience, it's been very positive.
And I think that's what this project and this field lab is really exciting about, is because it's going to have actual science where we can actually have data, where we can prove certain things, but also it comes from observation from the farmers who are actually doing it and actually sharing those observations with other farmers. And yeah, so can I just go to this one here, please, and I'll come back to you.
Just a question for Andy, really, regarding the flies and the AI you were saying. Obviously, there's only a couple of fly species that actually cause problems in livestock. Is there any way the AI will pick up, like parasitic wasps, so beneficial flies and things like that, do you think, in the future?
It's highly capable of doing that. It's just we're pointing in the wrong place. So when we point it in the right place, then I'm sure it will pick them up.
So, another one there, then towards the back. Thank you.
Just be quick. So certain trees like silver birch would be better in pasture, surely. Is that something you've come across? Because they're pioneer species. They hit pasture in the wild normally and then grow well.
Yeah, certainly. And there's been downy birch and some silver birch planted as well, so that really aspect. And also interesting where the shelter belts and things are, there's actually some natural regen occurring within that as well, which is outside of those ones we've actually planted. So which will be those pioneer species.
Okay, and the other thing is, do you ever put wool around the bottom of the trees? Because wool is really cheap at the moment. And I get the inside, you know when they deliver it, the freezer packs, I get it out and put it around. It's quite good.
Well, luckily, because as I say, other livestock are available. Some of our farmers are actually sheep farmers, and they are putting their own fleeces around the base to act as mulch mats. So yeah, but again, it'd be interesting to see the incidence of vole damage and that kind of stuff from there as well, because they do like a fleece.
And I'm using pheasant feathers because I'm a game dealer. So we pluck 30,000 pheasants. So we just spray them. So I'd like to use deer skins. I throw away 6,000 deer skins, but I think the ABP people would have something to say. But you can be inventive, and I keep looking at putting mulches in rows. I'm sure that you could actually use a feed wagon to put it out on it, but you haven't got to break your back to do these things. And also, if you've got a system, you pump primed it, you're producing wood. In the next batch you can potentially take the thinnings from the first lot and chop that up and use that. So it's all about using what you've got.
Totally, using the stuff on farm and what you've got access to. And so yes, there's a couple of questions at the back, please.
Hiya. I know you've talked a bit about the alley systems and the benefits of that in terms of sort of maintenance and establishment, but I just wondered if you could say anything about the cluster pasture, if anyone's doing that, benefits in terms of like establishment maintenance, or like the impact on the farming system after.
Sure, Rob.
Yeah, so we do have all three designs on our farm. I'm going to take a string from Henry's bow here. I'm going to tell the truth. It's a lot harder to manage. Our fields are cut for hay. We don't have any livestock in the fields at the moment. So the shelter belt and the regular spaced rows, tractor driving is nice and easy. The clusters, we have a combination of two difficulties. One is that the land is more steeply sloped in that field that we planted. And when the guys are driving the tractor around, they're finding it much more difficult. It's more difficult for them to drive around to then cut all of the hay and collect it up and bale it all. So yeah, they do spend more time in that field, which is a comparable size to the other fields. I mean, it's not a huge amount more, but in terms of managing the trees themselves, no, that the growth and the establishment is no different in the cluster planting than it is in the regular spaced rows or the shelter belt. So that we haven't noticed on our farm any disbenefits of cluster design, but we are hoping that in the future we'll see benefits from the biodiversity side of things, because the undisturbed area in the middle of the cluster is bigger than it is on the regular spaced rows. So we're hoping to see sort of more beneficial insect, I've phrased that wrong, higher insect populations in the cluster, because you don't have that level of disturbance of the ground from the hay cutting machinery.
And also interesting, they're not fenced, are they, those clusters? So
no.
Where there's some other ones which actually are fenced, so then stock can actually go in there. But also interestingly, I'm quite interested with some of the fencing here, so the circular kind of fencing of the clusters. I want to get these guys details. I don't know any fencers that actually want to fence in a circle. It always has to be a square. And so it'd be really interesting to see how, and then by having those squares, you can then put two together also, and have them kind of in separated lines, which makes it easier for actually kind of farms to collect. But again, by having those fences, it prevents the deer access, which again, you've been having some of the issues with the deer.
Yeah, some of the deer are camped in the clusters. So what we did, we planted 3, 5 or 8 trees in sort of triangles and then put the shrubs around the outside of it. So it's a natural sort of home for them, I imagine. So yeah, I've disturbed a few when I've been walking around. Like, oh, bloody hell. So yeah.
Any more questions? I saw Chris. So in the corner over there.
Forgive me, I came late. What size transplants are you using? What age? And what time did they arrive on site?
They arrived at a variety of different times. So we kind of talked a little bit about that. So do you want to talk about your experiences?
So they were all bare-rooted stock. They were all 40 to 60 centimetres tall. And we got ours in sort of late February, early March. And that's when we planted them. Took a few weeks, but...
I think some of hens arrived kind of beginning of February. And then I think they were kind of... I think in 2 batches as well, so then I had to wait for that second batch to come through, and then they went and started planting them. It took them about 2 weeks to kind of plant them.
I know that some people think that's quite late, but we did an establishment survey at the sort of end of the growing season in that first year, and we had 97% survival in that first year. So yeah, things were okay.
And it's one of those things in the ideal world. Yeah, it'd be great to have all your trees arrive in time from the supplier at the right, and the weather's right, and it's not frosty and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, you've just got to deal with where you are, what you've got, and to make the best job, I think. So it's something worth, if you can plan ahead for that and know early enough. But often it's kind of quite a late notice.
I mean, we're also planting in the middle of COVID, so it was a bit chaotic in all ways, to be perfectly honest. I mean, my experience is the smaller the tree you plant, the faster it grows and more rapidly overtakes the more expensive, bigger ones. So my advice always is to have as young and smaller tree as you possibly can and just make sure you guard it.
Definitely, and so there's going to be some really good talk about the tree nurseries over the next couple of days as well. So I really would recommend you going to see that. Any more questions? So we've got 1 or 2 more.
Thank you for your honesty with everything as well, especially Henry. It's nice to know that trees help people as well. How does these schemes, or how do your planting plans fit with the stewardship schemes, SFI schemes and stuff? Is there any sort of support with that? Does it conflict with things?
Hopefully we'll find out over these next 2 days. All of us will find out. So yeah, I mean, we probably would need to revisit the kind of EIA threshold aspect, I think, if we kind of started doing it now. But again, when the SFI agroforestry standard coming out, hopefully in January, it'd be really interesting to see how that fits. But again, with the row systems, it's about having as long as there's 24-metre spacings and that kind of thing, so they should be funding all of those. So it'd be interesting to see how it does come out. But at the moment, yeah.
And part of the reason why we're doing this really is to inform future policy, and by working with Rothamsted, who will give us that credibility of really decent data. Hopefully we can... The difficulty is policymakers are always working in a vacuum of information and making the wrong decisions, which we get foisted on us for 20 or 30 years and then go, oh, bugger, that didn't work. So, hopefully we can actually get the right thing done in the future through this research.
That's exactly right. I mean, what we're doing here, and also as FRAG, we're working with other kind of partners as well in Cornwall and across the southwest. And the work we're doing is being funded by DEFRA to actually inform their policy and inform them how to actually carry this out. And they're even taking some of our work and the data that we're collecting from this project and others to decide on how best to implement it. Because it's farmers, it's from their experience and their knowledge and what's best for them. And ultimately, if we want trees to establish and be out there, they've got to fit with how farmers are going to work with them and what they're able to do with them. Yep, cool. So go for that one. Probably got one more question, and then I think we are finished.
Are you going to be doing any research into browse quality? So looking at green leaf potassium, we've mentioned the protein content already. I'd think that's going to steer species selection as we go forward. So is that something that's on the cards?
Yeah, I'm certainly. I mean, we just say it's really early stage, and we need to work with Lindsay to kind of see what kind of like we need to start looking at, because at the moment there's some leaves, but not a lot of leaves. But so that's when we can start really kind of getting this kind of establishment kind of process out the way and kind of really seeing what works. Then once the trees are there, then great. We've got a whole raft of other kind of research aspects that we can actually undertake. But definitely that'll be kind of something we're going to focus on.
Yeah, we do have some livestock specialists at Rothamsted at Northwick, and they do that type of research. But like you say, at the moment, there's no point even trying to apply for funding because there's nothing for them to eat at the moment. So in 10 years' time, definitely, I think that is something that we would be looking at. And we also have like GPS trackers, so we can follow where individual animals go. So in the summer, if the animals are out there, you can see if they're using shelter to escape excessive heat in the, if you do get heat, hot summers in the future.
You've got a no fence.
Yeah, I'm using no fence collars for my more extensive grazing, which I'm actually loving. Really, I mean the story is, but I've just moved my my dry cow jerseys, which I fattened up to really decent looking high quality beef, and then delivered them while sitting in my bed using my no fence collars into my lairage of my mobile slaughterhouse. So that somebody just shut the door afterwards. So there's a great story there to move your cattle from your silvopasture into it. But we can see where they're sitting using the no fence. So we've got the GPS and the hotspots, and it will be fascinating to see what the cow decides whether or not he prefers to on a hot day to sit in the shade, or whether the flies will drive him out into the open. So there's all sorts of angles which will be fascinating to see as time goes on.
It is. It's really great. There's so many people involved who are interested in getting this data and this research, and the technology is meaning more and more. It's just so much simpler to actually get that information. So, yeah, and then one last question, please. Oh, one. Okay, yeah, and that one there. Sorry.
Thanks. I was wondering what your expected investment return period is on your agroforestry systems you set up.
Good question.
We'll tell you in 5 years.
I mean, again, it's so much of a context. We haven't paid for any materials. I haven't lost any income because I've used my stewardship payments to defray my opportunity costs. So at the moment, I'm bumping along at a pretty well zero investment in this. Other than, it's. It just depends how you set it up, and it does seem that the world is full of free trees at the moment. I'm not sure that's a good idea because they always arrive when somebody's lambing and as a consequence sit in the corner of a yard for a month. But I think you have to value your trees and take them seriously. But yeah, it's a good question. We are actually going to be doing financial metrics on this. So it is all being recorded, but in my particular case, it hasn't cost me anything, to be honest.
And then one last question here.
Well, sorry, I was going to add something. I mean, I think it depends on what you sort of include. Like last summer, when we had that really hot period, we had two groups of cows with bulls, and we found that the group going in our existing silvopasture system, they had a 3-week tighter grazing, 3-week tighter calving group than the ones which are out in the open field, dealing with the heat stress. So I think there's so many factors which you can't really put into into some sort of spreadsheet. But so I think so it's quite a tricky one to really sort of get down to.
Yeah, and so one last question there.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about fencing. I mean, that to me is a bigger cost than the trees. And I just wondered if maybe particularly Henry can just talk about how you've stopped energetic young suckler herds trying to get to your trees.
We found we have had a few break-ins into the into the shelter belts, and they cause a lot more damage because they can sort of rampage around. Whereas if you've had the odd break in the alley system, they're just limited to that one strip, and they just go past and they find a weak spot and they jump out again. So, and as Andy said, it's fortunate that they're young, they can bounce back again. So there hasn't been any sort of catastrophic loss. Yes. So we've got mains fencer.
2 lines of electric.
Yeah. So I've got hip height and knee height.
Okay, thank you.
And interesting, on Hen's sites, some of the actual cows actually broke in before she'd finished doing the fencing, and actually went through and then knocked them all over. And some of the bullocks were literally enjoying playing with some of the tree guards that she was observing. So it's really important to get your fencing done before the cows go anywhere near.
And the whole point of a system is that ultimately the cattle or sheep are in there eating it. It's just getting it past that early phase. So, using the no fence has helped me. I would say that 14-metre rows are too narrow a constriction to use no fence. That's not going to work. I thought, oh, good, I can keep them in a 14-metre row 300 yards long, but nope, it doesn't. I should say double it. 24 to 28 metres, I would think you'd probably be comfortable with. I think so much of this, when you look at it, actually, you're standing there in the field, it all becomes extremely obvious. So much of what we're talking about, when you see it, it just becomes common sense, really.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, I was conscious of the time. One last question.
Have any of you used mesh around individual trees for cows, the galvanised mesh?
Yeah, no, like cactus guards or anything like that. No, all the girls, no, we haven't. So it's basically been normal like tree shelters and spiral guards supplied by the Woodland Trust, and all of the sites have had that. Again, to have this kind of this continuity, and it's going to be able to compare from different sites and how it's going to work. But the trees haven't been planted in the middle of a field with cactus guards.
I have used cactus guards in other places, and they are bloody good.
Yeah, no, they are great. They are very good. So, okay, thank you very much for all that. So, I just want to say, in conclusion, really, I just want to say that from my involvement in this, which has been quite new, actually, I've been really impressed with how the farmers are really passionate about their trees and about the improvements that they can actually bring for their animal welfare and their business and the biodiversity on their farm. I think they're very brave in taking that leap of faith to plant trees before they actually really knew what the benefits were going to be, and also quite how much work it was going to be to establish them. But also, I think the most important aspect of this project is the opportunity for peer-to-peer learning through shared experiences. And something that Andy touched on earlier is that this is all gained from trial and error, or almost trial by error. And you have to give it a go if you're going to learn. So some of the farmers, some of the other farmers are here, and many of the project partners are here as well for the next 2 days. So feel free to kind of catch up with us and talk to anybody about it if you want to know a bit more. Also, innovative farmers have produced a leaflet on the actual field lab, which is available from their stall just up on the corner there. I'd like to thank everybody involved in organising this session. Thanks, guys, for the tech and stuff. And thank you for the show. I'm really excited by this. It's great. Our job's done. We've got 2 days of fun time now. And thank you all for your time this morning. And I hope you've found it useful. Have a good show.
Thank you for listening. We'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Sainsbury's, and our other major sponsors, Farmers Weekly Transition, Forestry Commission, and Till Hill, and all the attendees for making this show such an overwhelming success. To get advice and support for your agroforestry project, either visit woodlandtrust.org.uk/plant or soilassociation.org/agroforestry.